Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Hope everybody out there has been enjoying the holiday season. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit subscribe, follow along on your podcast platform of your choice. If you have it in you, drop a review. I want to make a quick call out over here. As you probably know, if you're tuned in, I recently released my second book, Audacious, Uncaging Your Authentic Self. I am linking in a discount code for the book with the show notes of this episode. And so for Mile 40 listeners, I want to do you a solid and give you a discount on the book. So check it out in the show notes. I am very excited about today's episode. Today's episode is featuring Andrew MacPhail. Andrew is Chief of Staff at Chickatelli Associates, a nonprofit health and human services organization in New York City. He has nearly 20 years experience in nonprofit administration, operations, and system development. He has dedicated his career to improving the quality of healthcare and social services delivered to at-risk populations. Andrew received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Musical Theater from Western Michigan University and a Master of Public Administration in Nonprofit Management and Leadership from Baruch. Prior to his career, Andrew worked as a musical theater performer. After several years' pause, he returns to performing in 2024, and we're going to dig into that. Now, this is where Andrew and I had met, and this is the part of his bio that gets me excited. He's a passionate runner. He's completed his 20th marathon this past November, and that's actually where Andrew and I happened to run into each other. He's going to complete his 6th of the 6 world majors in Tokyo this coming March. He's a member of Front Runners New York, New York Roadrunners, and the Abbott World Marathon Majors Gold Club. Andrew lives a sober life. This February, he will celebrate 23 years alcohol-free. Now, Andrew, I want to give you the preface that I don't usually read the entire bios, but your bio is going to encapsulate so much of what we're going to touch on today, and I felt like I had to run through it. So first and foremost, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Bishoy. It's great to be here.
I really appreciate the fact that this last November at the New York City Marathon, prior to hitting the start line, you had approached me at the tent. And for me, I never know how those interactions are going to go, because the truth of the matter is, sitting in my seat, I'm not even really sure who's listening, who's watching, who's even paying attention. But you were so sincere in your approach, and it really resonated with me. And then after you and I got to talking, I had been following along with your journey, and I saw the level of vulnerability you put out there with regards to, in particular, your sobriety journey. So that was the reason why I wanted to make sure that I reached out to you right away, because when I put 2 and 2 together, I knew you were a phenomenal runner. Your performance stands for itself. But on top of that, I could tell there was a deeper layer to your journey. So I just want to say thank you to kick things off.
Oh, thank you. That's really great to hear. It was so wonderful seeing you that morning after following you on social media and being inspired by your story. So I'm so glad we had that opportunity.
Let's take things back a little bit, right? And so I know that when we had talked before this recording, you had told me about your professional journey and how essentially you were looking to pursue your career out of college when it came to the arts, and you were rerouted. Let's walk the audience through post college, what went down.
Sure, absolutely. I think it actually we need to go back a little bit further than that.
Sure.
As a kid, I was always performing and singing, and it was just no question that that's what I would do in life. And so I continued along that path, and I studied musical theater in college. I moved to New York, and I started what was looking to be a promising career, having a lot of fun and great opportunity in working. And unfortunately, it did take a turn. It's interesting. I will talk very openly about repeated sexual abuse in my life and how that weighed on my decision to step back temporarily. Well, as you said, we'll get to that later, from my career as a singer and as a performer. And it really, when I look back, it's unfortunate to realize that throughout my life, I had 4 perpetrators of sexual abuse. The first was at the age of 12 by a choir director, and then at the age of 15 by a voice teacher. At the age of 20 by a theater producer and director. And then at the age of 25 by a prominent Broadway casting director. When that last instance occurred and it really threatened my career, I just stepped away and I decided out of fear that I would be blacklisted and my reputation be tarnished by someone in such a position of power that I just decided that I couldn't take it and I needed to stop, sort of with an understanding that I would someday return and continue to explore that passion, which I really believe I was put on the earth to do. A little bit about just the instance. I won't go into it too deeply, but I was being considered for a role and was invited to audition. And the casting director then invited me to dinner, and that led to drinks. I was then invited to this individual's apartment, where unfortunately at some point I blacked out and woke up at some point. I don't really know how much time had passed, and fled. And then the next day when I had a conversation with the individual, I was looking for some clarity of what happened. I didn't receive that. The conversation did not go very well, as you can imagine. And it was when I declined a subsequent invitation to get together with this individual that I was asked, was I not worried about my career? And so really after that, I abandoned the performing career. That again, that fear of being blacklisted by someone in such a position of power left me terrified. And I jumped ship. And it was in that moment that I asked myself, my gosh, how did this happen? Like again and again in my life. And the really sad and unfortunate piece is that each of these individuals was brought into my life because of my talent and because I had a gift that these folks were, you would hope they would help cultivate. And while that's a very sad thing to think about, I'm glad that I came to that realization that was really years later after the Harvey Weinstein stories broke. And in listening to those young women share their stories, I was just, it just, the light bulb clicked. And I thought, my gosh, artists, performers, singers, what have you, we're all waiting for that one big break, right? And I mean, we do anything for that break because once it happens, your career is really started. And so, of course, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you would be in a private, setting with an individual who yields that power. I've really spent a lot of time through therapy and studying on sexual perpetrators, sexual assault, how the perpetrator identifies victims who seem vulnerable and maybe have low self-esteem and an obedient or compliant personality. And then they gradually gain that victim's trust by showing them special attention and providing lavish praise, lending a sympathetic ear. And then they manipulate that relationship to create a dependence and an intimacy. And they oftentimes will convince the victim that they're special. And then also they make clear to the individual that they hold something that only they can give to the victim. In this case, the power of, being in a show, in a film, whatever. And then they find opportunities to be alone with the victim. So in really learning about that, it's helped me to, it's given me great peace, and it's made me understand, victims, we oftentimes tend to find out what was it that I did wrong, or how did I find myself in these situations time and again. And it's really powerful to read other people's stories, to hear other people's stories, to know that you're not alone. And that's a big reason why I'm grateful to you to have this conversation, because I hope that other folks will hear that barrier, that obstacle, and then realize that, wow, there's ways to get through that and get over that and get across that, and to as a result succeed. So that's really how I gave up my career, which at that point I had already been catering as a way to make some money while I was performing, and I just decided to kick that up and took a management position in the catering industry as a way to kind of save money and figure out what I was going to do with my life. And then unfortunately, it was also at that time, which was the original question, that my drinking really escalated. I used that as a way to, escape the trauma and to numb the pain from the situation. And that's really where my drinking became a problem.
There's, most important thing that I need to say right now is I just need to thank you for your vulnerability. And I don't know if you've publicly shared all of this. I know that you've been vulnerable with your audience before, but you just unpacked a lot. And on a personal level, I'm grateful that you trust me with your story, and I'm also thankful that you're shining a light on something so personal that I'm sure impacts so many others. I want to dive in a little bit deeper, not necessarily into the specific situation that happened in your mid-20s, but maybe take us further back. Let's talk about childhood. Let's talk about your parents, and let's talk about maybe in those initial instances, did you have anyone to lean on, or was this all just kind of held up in your own head for a long time?
It was mostly held up in my head. I was raised in the Catholic Church, and as we know, there's certainly documented there's a lot of abuse that happens there. I did not experience that. Well, one of the music teachers was an employee of the Catholic Church, but no one was talking about this then. So no, I didn't talk about it. I did share the instance when I was 15 with this voice teacher, with a family member who took me to speak with the priest who was in charge of the parish where this person was employed. And I didn't really get the results that I think I should have. I don't think it was addressed. We were told to please not talk about this, that the priest would deal with that with the individual. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. No, I really haven't shared a lot of this. I haven't shared it certainly with the public. I've talked to a couple of family members since, but as a kid, I didn't. I mean, there's really I'm sure what you've heard or read about sexual abuse, particularly with children, there's such fear and there's such shame and there's such fear about speaking. Oftentimes the perpetrator can really create such a strong sense of fear and shame. And so no, I didn't have the opportunity to talk about that. Later as an adult, when I went through some vigorous therapy with a specialist who deals particularly with sexual abuse in childhood and also other forms of trauma, that I realized why I didn't. I always kind of had thought, oh, I should have, I could have, but as a kid, you don't have the wherewithal. So I wasn't really able to share that with folks in my family until years later, and just with a couple. Fortunately, I have a mother who from day one, I have always been aware that I'm loved and supported unconditionally, despite her childhood upbringing. So that was a wonderful gift that I think not every kid has. So I think that certainly helped me get through. But no, to talk about it publicly now is so important. I think particularly with boys and young men, there's additional stigma around sexual abuse. But, statistically, I think 1 in 6 boys are sexually abused, and I think the statistic is as high as 1 in 3 for young girls. So I think it's something that's very important to talk about.
100%. Let's contextualize for the audience a little bit. How old are you now?
I'm 52. Believe it or not.
Amazing.
My God,
Amazing.
I
And
can't
for anyone
believe
who's watching on
it.
for anyone who's watching on YouTube, I'm sure your jaws are about to hit the ground because you can't believe it. But with regards to the there's an element to that journey that's very lonely, right? Like you have something bottled up that has significantly impacted you. You're probably trying to make sense of how it's impacted you. I bet, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't want to make any presumptions.
Sure.
Let's talk about how it impacted your own relationships growing up, right? Like your own quest or search for partnership,
Right.
afterwards, right? And again, I want to be very careful about how I say this. I don't want to say, okay, like it happens once and then maybe you work through it and then you're fine. It's not how it works. It's something that's
Right.
going to be consistently, in the back of your mind. And in your case, it happened more than once.
Yes.
And so can you walk us through your own, quest for partnership throughout that period and how your experiences impacted that? And maybe walk us in even until today.
Absolutely. Yes. I was going to say to this day. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a sense of trust that really is not fully developed or established. It certainly had, and I think in many ways has negatively impacted my comfort with intimacy. That's a common theme that folks experience. To make oneself vulnerable and to then be sort of have that taken advantage of repeatedly, especially, it really does a number on a kid's head and then a young adult's head and then the adult mind. And it's something that required for me. I want to be careful just to share my story and not make assumptions about others. For me, it really took a lot of hard, deep work, as I mentioned, with a therapist, and really to understand that I am lovable and that I'm worthy, that I'm deserving of love, and that I'm able to give love. That's another thing. We can tend to shut ourselves off from expressing love because of that fear that it'll be, ripped away. So it has impacted my life as far as relationships and as far as intimacy, and also it's made that awareness. It may sound odd, but that awareness has also made me realize that my relationships with family, friends, loved ones, they feel so much more powerful to me because they're based and rooted in honesty and vulnerability and love. And to open oneself up to loving and being loved can be a really hard chore. It has been for me. It had been for me. And to reach a point in my life to understand that I'm lovable and able to give love, that's a rather powerful gift.
It's been, let's call it 27, 28 years, right? It's 24 to 52. So
Yes.
as you look back on it now, is that chapter still ongoing? Is it closed? How do you look at that chapter of your life right now? I know it's not something that's going to go away, but if you were to be writing your own memoir right now,
Yeah.
based on the years of therapy and the self work,
Yeah.
what would you say about that chapter? Is that it's a chapter that never ends, or it's a chapter that now that you've done the work, you're really only looking forward?
It's a dark chapter, an unfortunate chapter. The period has empowered me. It may sound unbelievable, for people to understand. It's empowered me because I was really forced. I wasn't forced. I chose to dig deep. I chose to understand why. I chose to understand because I knew it wasn't right. I really dug deep and chose to understand more about myself. And having made the realization that I'm a good person, okay, so now what does the life of a good person look like? What are some areas that perhaps I've been denying myself for years? And so that's been incredibly empowering. I don't know if those instances had not happened, if I would have come to that realization. That's the way that things did happen. And I'm really grateful for that sense of empowerment that came out of struggle and such great obstacle.
I want to make sure that your story is so incredible, and this could easily be a 3-part episode. I want to every time I want to ask a question to take us to the next topic, I just keep thinking of another question. But I think these questions are so important, and I really want to tackle them. Let's talk about your identity between being a youngster and let's call it 30 years old. Were you secure in your identity throughout, the period where you had these, horrible experiences, or were you still in a place where you were still trying to figure out who am I, during that period?
Definitely the latter. Yeah. I was trying to figure out who I was. And especially with abandoning a dream and a career that had been my base.
Yeah.
It was really threw me for a loop. I was like, who am I?
Because you were always going to be the performer.
Absolutely.
Right?
I was. Yeah.
Right. That absolutely. Was. It's essentially, you can measure it up with an athlete who ends up, kind of having to walk away from a sport that it's like a. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to compare it specifically to an injury, but it's like an athlete who just wakes up one day and learns I can never play the sport that I had been training for my whole life.
Yes, and I must say there, yes, absolutely, and also thank goodness because it was not from a physical situation like losing a limb or what have you with an athlete. I can do that again, and I am doing that again. So. What I thought perhaps the door had been permanently shut, although in the back of my mind, I had always thought, well, someday, I mean, how could I not? Such a part of, my core, my fiber. But then to think that something was over, then to have the opportunity to revisit that in a much stronger place is, again, quite a gift.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you know me, you know that I like to look good and feel good. As an endurance athlete who trains daily, I need my wardrobe to fit the mold. Roan creates performance-driven clothing for your active lifestyle. Each piece is designed for versatility and made with integrity to outfit you for an active life lived on your own terms. The Roan promise is to help you move forever forward. Use code MILE40 for 20% off online and in-store for new customers only. Visit www.roan.com, that's Roan spelled RHONE, or find your local store and move forever forward starting today. So, you had mentioned you're making your comeback officially in 2024. What have you been doing to keep that muscle alive? Over the last 30 years?
Well, it's interesting. Not much the first maybe 5 to 10. And I've always enjoyed singing and kept my kept my voice in shape just by, singing around the house or in the shower or what have you. I just love singing. And it really was, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but it really was through my running community that I had the opportunity this past year to get up and perform in front of an audience for the first time in I don't know how many years. And the feeling, hitting that stage and singing, and that feeling and the rapport, the energy with the audience and the feedback was so encouraging and beautiful. Also coming from my running community, Front Runners New York, in a safe place with safe people who, we support one another, was just fantastic. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is like another gift that has come from running. So I'm working with a music director who will put together a show, and I don't know where and when this year, but it's happening and we've committed to it. So that's something that's incredibly exciting. I feel like reaching that point, like the weight of the world is lifted off of me. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm free again to do this, and who knows what will come of it. The difference now is that I've built another incredible career at a wonderful organization and incredible people. And so the difference is that it's not something that I feel I desperately need. I don't have to book a show or have to, to earn a paycheck or to make a living. It's something that I can pursue from my passion for performing, and to have that balance just feels great.
I love that for so many reasons. I mean, you touch on the power of the running community, which can just stretch forward to so many other, communities tied into fitness and kind
Right.
of, the level of empowerment and the ability to really dig deep within in that community. Because the truth is, when it comes to the fitness world, everybody is waking up daily and realizing, they're capable of something that at one point maybe they thought they were no longer capable of, or that they just weren't capable of in general.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And to see that is awesome. And another thing that really stands out about your comeback, if you will, is the fact that you had mentioned earlier that the industry was mired by situations similar to yours. And I don't want to make big generalizations. And we all, followed the headlines during the Me Too movement and all of that. But I do want to educate perhaps people that are not in the industry that are listening to the show today, right? And I want them to get a sense of, how much of what we saw during that era was running rampant. How much of it was more so just exceptions and just really bad people, just so they can understand, the industry and your story, and really the power of your story. And the other thing is, I do think that watching you succeed next year, because you will succeed next year, is going to lay a phenomenal cornerstone for someone else who was impacted this way in the past, who's going to say, if he did it, then I can do it. And I can get back to the thing that I love. So I'll let you answer as you feel with that. And then I do want to dive in a little bit into your alcohol journey.
Sure, absolutely. So about the Me Too movement and the way I understood your question is, before that came to light, was this something maybe that was happening in the industry? Is that what you're?
Yeah, and just your take as someone who's been in the industry, someone who's been impacted by it, just to kind of give the audience, because again, the majority of the audience here is going to be coming from the fitness world.
Right.
There might be some, in the performing arts world.
Yeah, absolutely.
But everyone's just following the headlines, so we can't tell what's like,
That's right.
What's a generalization and what's not.
Yes, I think it is common, unfortunately. As I mentioned before, with young kids and predators can identify folks who are vulnerable, who are looking for something that only they can give them. And then as folks are young adults or adults, like I mentioned, if someone is holding the key to your career, you find yourself in situations where you can be taken advantage of. And so, yes, my experience with friends who work in the industry is that it's not uncommon. Yeah. And then also, there's not a whole lot, and I don't know, I really want to study more and learn more about this, but I don't think that there is a whole lot of folks talking about this when it happens to gay men. My initial ideas around that is based on that sort of unfortunate historical given that there's already so much stigma, so much fear, so much misunderstanding about gay men, and of course, just from the beginning of time, right? Folks have sort of been hidden, and it's not been discussed, again, out of fear and ignorance. But I don't think that as many gay men perhaps talk about this. Because there's that added element of societal shame that's been such a part of the world for a long while. I think that certainly has gotten better and better. I think at the past maybe 4 years or so, we've sort of slid back, but that can be silenced. We'll continue to grow as a society and to learn and understand. But it is common in the industry, and I think that there hasn't been, also from what I've seen, as much talk about it in the Broadway casting community as there has been in the film community. Maybe because Hollywood is such a bigger, larger story that would make headlines more. The theater and Broadway community, perhaps it doesn't sell as many headlines, but I'm really not aware. There have been a couple, but there's not been as much whistleblowing, I think, in the theater and the Broadway community.
Yeah. It has my head just thinking a lot about checks and balances, and, what is the industry doing to be better about this? And why or how is it the fact that one person can have so much control? And at the end of the day, you're right, it's also a scaling thing, right? When you think about a big Hollywood production versus a Broadway show versus something even more local, the lower you go down, the more that control could really sit with one person.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
You touched on a really important point too, around the fact that, unfortunately, we both, I think, will agree that we hope that society is moving in the right direction. But when it does come to gay men too, there's another element to this that makes the progress seem even darker. To put it directly, put it bluntly there.
Right. Absolutely.
And so I really appreciate you bringing all this to light. I want to make sure we touch on everything. So where I want to go from here is, you had talked about the fact that it was in your mid-20s, after that occurrence, where you really started to spiral when it came to drinking.
Right.
Just walk us back a little bit. When did drinking start for you?
It started at 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was it just more around socializing, or was there anything else that brought you into drinking at a younger age?
No, I think it was mostly socializing. I'm sure there were, situations, things, events that I really viewed drinking or any type of substance use, unless it's purely social. There are folks who can go and have a drink or two with friends and everything's fine. But I was always more of an excessive type. It started socially, of course, with, kids, but it was always a little bit excessive with me. And I think that folks who use a substance excessively, it's usually to hide something, to mask some pain, to get over some trauma. There was nothing major, until I was 12. So actually, as I'm speaking, I'm realizing, sure, there was something major, but I didn't think of drinking as escaping from the first two instances of the abuse. But this is a very good question. And I'm realizing as we speak, yeah, that probably, had a lot to do with it. It really wasn't until later, after I quit performing that I knew it was a problem. Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting. I brought this up on the show before. I, as of like this month, have gone a year with zero alcohol.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Great.
And, my story is a little bit different because when I kind of decided to stop drinking, kind of was a natural progress. I was doing a dry January, and then I found out I was running Boston in April. So I said, okay, let me stay, dry until April came. And then I had Michael Chernow on the show, and I don't know if you know his story, but it involved a lot of alcohol and drug abuse. And I was, just kind of enlightened listening to his episode about it. And I've always wanted to be, the most high performing individual that I could be. And I said to myself, this is someone who I really respect, admire. He's extremely vulnerable and authentic. And, maybe if I, don't drink, it'll enhance my overall performance as a father, as a husband, as a, writer, podcaster, whatever it may be, runner. And so I said, okay, like I'm just going to keep this going. And in my head, I was like, okay, let me see if I could push this for a year. And I did. As of like literally this recording, we're at a year. But what's been interesting to me over this period of time is over and over again, I have had to, or I've subconsciously analyzed my relationship with alcohol. Like, did I really need to be drinking as much as I was drinking prior? And I will admit, the last couple of years, I actually didn't drink too much. We had a baby, so things were kind of slowing down. But I think I rewind even further back where I was probably drinking a little bit heavier. And, as I continue to think through it, I uncovered more and more about my relationship with alcohol and where my mind would go, on those nights where I maybe had one too many drinks. And I would reveal insecurities that I'd had. And I would reveal things that I was hiding. And I'd reveal, the darker thoughts that I had. And it was really, really interesting to me because as it was happening, I never thought it was as negatively impactful as it was. But now looking back on it, like I can kind of say like, and maybe it's because, I'm in a much more secure place in life. I'm happily married. I have a daughter that I love very much. I've built this platform that I'm very proud of. And I'm at a point where I don't really care what anyone thinks.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, but it's interesting to me that, again, as I think back, alcohol did a very big role in masking a lot of those feelings.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a rather immediate escape.
Yeah, and so in your journey, because let's get to the point where you decided I got to stop, and then we can go from there. So walk us through there.
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to say how wonderful, what a great gift to give to your child.
Thank you.
To be fully present and not have to ever wonder, oh, is this an issue? Before I stopped, I would think, oh, do I have a problem? Don't I have a problem? And then when I stopped, am I an alcoholic? Was I an alcoholic? All of those questions, it doesn't matter because the alcohol is eliminated from my life. And that's such a beautiful thing. It's like, it doesn't matter. I'm free. So I really appreciate you sharing that about your journey. When I ultimately decided to drink, so I was, for about 5 years, working and making decent money as a young person and drinking and escaping and escaping. And unfortunately, right before my 30th birthday, my oldest brother, who was just a phenomenal man, incredible human being, and who also was an alcoholic, ended his life. And that loss was just horrific. My world was really turned upside down. And I realized in that moment there was no denying that I had a problem. I think looking at his problem, and he and I had talked about it in our drinking, and at some points I wasn't and he was, and he wasn't and I was. And to lose him to such a horrible disease was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
And it also was, as I mentioned, right before my 30th birthday. I was starting a new decade in my life. And I decided I couldn't, that was too much. I could no longer justify having alcohol in my life, whether I thought I had a problem or not. I did have a problem, but that was the catalyst for change. And that was really when I eliminated alcohol and nicotine from my life on my 30th birthday, and began my sober life, which can be a challenging process. It was for me in many ways, but nonetheless, that was the end of it. And moving forward, I wanted to be present and sober, clear-headed, and truly deal with the pain and the trauma that was trapped in my body.
That's thank you for sharing that. And I couldn't even imagine. And I'm sure people listening to this podcast are like, "Oof, that's a lot in 30 years. That's a lot in 30 years of life to have to deal with, and to internalize and rationalize and act on." Did you have any other siblings, or was it just you and your brother?
Yes, I have a brother who's another incredible guy. He's an educator in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and just one of the most peaceful, loving individuals you'll ever meet. So we have each other, and nieces and nephews, and some real incredible family members who I love deeply, and who we've stuck together, and the relationships have strengthened and grown over the years. I think something that can come from such deep loss and grief is, if one chooses, is to really embrace what you have and to celebrate and nurture the relationships that you have and the love that exists among family. That's been something that has been important to me, particularly in the last few years. For a while, I just kind of had to unplug and get away and do my own thing. There were times where I was angry, or understandably, or a million other emotions. But I've come around and have come to realize the importance of continuing to cultivate those relationships with the people that I love and who I know truly love me. So that's another gift that can come out of tragedy.
100%.
Yeah.
Were you surrounded by anyone else who was impacted by alcoholism besides, potentially your brother, or was it just you two?
Well, alcoholism runs in my family. Okay. And so I've seen a lot of people who exhibit behaviors of alcoholism, and I'd seen it have a negative impact on people and relationships. So I was aware of that, and often was aware of it. I could, if I was in a setting where it was negatively impacting people or a situation, I was very attuned to that. So I was aware of it, and it was something that affected my mother's family deeply. She lost her father to alcoholism at a young age, and then also on the other side of my family. So I'd seen it, and was aware of alcoholism and its negative effects.
So that leads me to my next question around, your brother. your brother passes, it's an incredibly difficult circumstance to have to face on your own. How would you explain to the audience the decision to move in the right direction versus using alcohol to numb this tragedy, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that,
It's
that's
it's
got to be
rather
very difficult.
yeah, it's rather simple. When I lost Matthew, I just couldn't lie to myself anymore. I didn't have that ability. I didn't. It just. I had to stop lying to myself.
Yeah.
It was a rather immediate awareness. I had to not live that lie and eliminate that. Um, who knows what it could have done to me? But again, it doesn't matter. I did. I just, you know, soon after turned 30, and that was it. That was it.
Yeah. You talk about the experience you had with abuse and how uh, looking back and going through it, there are elements of guilt and shame. And
Yeah.
you talk about this experience. Um, was there similar feelings of, processing guilt and shame over your journey with alcohol? Looking back on it, or was it different emotions that perhaps you were dealing with? I mean, I again, like when I speak about my own experience, I definitely would have done things differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Right.
I'm not one that has many regrets. But again, over the last year, just kind of like random thoughts spurring through my mind around random things that took place when I was
Right.
in a different place in life. I don't want to say that like I have deep shame, but I definitely have feelings of, yeah, like I probably would have done things differently if I had known
Oh
then what I
yeah.
know now.
Yeah, absolutely. I do too. I did too. You think of things that happened when you had a few too many, or
Yeah.
situations you found yourself in. Um, and if I may,
Yeah.
I'm not a trained therapist, but I think those little reminders are sort of glimpses of a time that is past. And so I encourage you, I encourage myself, I encourage anyone, not to dwell in those moments. I
Yeah.
think they're great reminders of who we are today and why and how much stronger we are today. Um, they can be fine to remind us, but I certainly don't encourage anyone to dwell on them, because they're really. I sometimes, if they pop up, I'll say, "Oh, I let that thought return to the nothingness from which it came." It's like in the past. It's like it's done. I didn't do anything, you know, egregious or
Yeah.
disastrous. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I relate to you. I thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we have those thoughts. It's like, oh, did I really say that or really do that? Um, and again, that's certainly not the man I am today.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I mean, you're spot on with that. And I think that one of the things I love about this episode is the fact that there's so much to be gained and it's so far ranging in terms of application, where there's probably someone out there listening who's at
Yes.
their own stage in this cycle,
Yes.
who's now hearing it, and from two completely different people, meaning me and you, who had two completely different experiences, who are coming to similar realizations around it. And we'll continue to have different experiences. I could speak for myself. Sometimes it's hard for me to look at some of my more recent successes, even just kind of looking at these books and kind of
Yeah.
thinking, how is this the same guy that did whatever 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago? And there's got to be
Absolutely.
someone that knew me 15, 20 years ago that thinks this guy's a con artist, and then there's that guy. So like there's, and again, similar to you, no, I don't believe I did anything egregious or,
Right,
malicious
right.
or evil. But that is, the power of alcohol, the drug,
Sure. Yeah.
essentially. And so, um, I want to make sure that now we touch on the good stuff.
Yes, let's
So
do it. They're running.
we've been talking for like 45, 50 minutes here,
Oh my
and hopefully
goodness.
people have continued to tune in. But you, my friend, are about to complete your 6 star. And
I'm so excited.
let's talk about your running journey because,
Yeah.
like I said, when I kick things off here, you've got a phenomenal track record. You're in excellent shape, and you're putting up some pretty impressive numbers. So let's
Thank
talk
you.
about the running journey and really the overall fitness journey and when it started. Because was fitness ever a part of your younger life?
Not a whole lot. I played a few sports here and there, and never really enjoyed many of them. I did like a season of baseball and a season of track and a season of maybe a couple seasons of swimming. It wasn't really a big part. I think my parents encouraged me to try things, and also soccer. There are some funny stories. I was never really a star athlete, and was very very much like a team cheerleader, and an optimist, and keeping the team optimistic. But as far as my own personal performance, I was never. No, I wasn't an excellent athlete. But running, I actually happened upon in a very unexpected way. I had a friend who was training for a 5K, and she asked me if I'd run with her. And I said, "Are you out of your mind?" I didn't enjoy running. I had run that one season of track in high school, and as I mentioned, I didn't particularly enjoy it, and wasn't so great at it. But I did run with her, and then ran like a second time and third time with her, and she commented on my great running form, which I had no idea what that meant, but I enjoyed how it made me feel. It was just, as Bishoy, when it clicks and you're in that place that, words can't really describe, and the endorphins are going, and you hit that point of, for me, it's a mental and a physical and almost a spiritual click, that just happens. I really, really loved it. And I was hooked. I'm really grateful to my friend Maggie for getting me to run with her those few times. And it was I think I ran a marathon about right around a year after that. And I've been running ever since. I love it. As you mentioned, I just completed my 20th marathon in New York, where I had the pleasure of seeing you that morning. And it was an incredible gift. I'm like, wow, who knew? I had no idea. Like, and to have this passion and this need. When Runner's World magazine wrote a nice feature on me, I was part of their training team for this year's marathon, and they asked folks to share about their running and how running has helped them overcome obstacles in life. And so I was selected to be part of that team. And when they shared the story, I talked about that, how, just what an unexpected gift to have that. And it's just such a part of who I am, and what I do, and the community that I've become a part of. As I mean, we go to those races throughout the year, or you bump into someone on Staten Island before the marathon, and it's just such a beautiful, powerful sense of family for me. It's like, we understand each other. We're a rare breed, we get up early in the morning to go and, run.
We pay to put ourselves through adversity, and we do
Exactly.
it, and we do it again,
And we do it again.
and we
I
do it
don't know about
again.
you, but there have been a couple of marathons where I've crossed the finish line, and I'll say that's the last one. Like, that's ridiculous. And then, probably within a matter of hours, you're
looking for that next race.
the next
I learned to stop saying that over
Yeah,
time,
I did
but
too.
you're absolutely right. And one of the things that sticks out about you and where you've come in terms of the running circuit is, you mentioned a little bit earlier, and I'm going to botch the wording here, but you're a man of extremes, right? And so, you went from being an alcoholic to being a 20-time marathoner, right? And it's not like I ran a marathon after recovering from alcoholism. It's like I now finished my 20th marathon, and I'm going to complete the 6 world majors. And so I have to imagine you went from a period of, like we discussed, not really understanding your identity to a period of, probably the deepest introspection during all these solo runs. And, that's something that stands out to me in my seat, kind of understanding about the running world, understanding the power of the running world. And although my background was different, I had my own adversity, and I realized the power of that introspection once I started embracing, the world of endurance sports, and in particular running. And so, for the listeners out there, I'm sure who you are as a runner today is not the same person who started running, however many years ago when you went on that run with her.
No.
Yeah. And so I kind of want to dive into that a little bit. And I want you to tell me at what point the love affair really kind of soaked in.
Well, the training for my first marathon was terrifying. And not really terrifying. Yeah, it was. It was just because I was, I had like this 16-week plan. I can tend to be very hard on myself, and tend to maybe be a bit of an overachiever with certain things. And so, as you mentioned, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it right. So to commit to that was in a way terrifying. But really crossing that finish line, that first marathon in Philadelphia, what I experienced during the marathon, and I'll call it the beautiful insanity you experience. You see such extremes. You see these athletes cross in a little over 2 hours, and you see other people barely walking like mile 10, and you see such just such a variance. But all of that I just love it, because as I'm sure you've experienced, for sure, you're running a race or a marathon, and there's someone who's struggling, and you genuinely from your heart and soul, you say to them, you got this.
You got this.
Come on, let's go. I often say to people, embrace the light. Just get to the finish line. It's such a genuine, supportive, form of love and support. I really was hooked from the first marathon, crossing the first finish line. Yeah.
I love that. And you're spot on. A couple episodes ago, I had Kaylee Williamson on. And I said it then, and I'll say it again. That was one of, if not the best episode I've ever recorded, because she truly, it moved me. And I watched that video over and over and over again of her crossing the finish line. And it was a true ode to humanity to see her do it. And, I joke about it now, but, I when I had her on, I botched her bio. She finished 21 half marathons. And I'm like, geez,
wow.
We don't realize what we're truly capable of until we put ourselves in these, highly uncomfortable positions. And to see someone like Kaylee represent everything you just talked about on the
Yes.
course, and just the different backgrounds and circumstances, and
Right.
probably the internal adversities that you and I know nothing about.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
we pass by these runners, it really is a testimony to the power of not only the human body but the human spirit.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah,
and
two quick things about that. I when I was in London, I often loved to go back after running and cheer folks on.
yeah,
And when I was in London, I like went back to my hotel. I took a shower. Of course, I was exhausted. I wasn't ready to eat. I was still a little nauseous, and I needed to get back out there. And I went and I stood about a mile from the finish line and was cheering people on. And it was the most beautiful feeling. Like I was just moved, to tears of joy, encouraging people who at that point, were really struggling. And it's just incredible to be part of that community. And then the second story, when I ran Chicago, I set a new personal record this past Chicago, and there were a bunch of folks from Front Runners New York, my team, who were there, and we all met up for dinner afterward. And one of this young guy on the team was just a remarkable human being and a phenomenal runner. I walked in and he had just run something. I think he ran like a 2:21, somewhere right around there. Just a phenomenal runner. And I walked into the restaurant and I was going to say, I can't believe, and before I could, he's like, congratulations, you just set a PR. And I'm thinking, this is such a testament to our community. Here's like a kid who just ran like a 2:21 and he's genuinely excited and congratulating me on my performance, which was, nearly an hour, slower, but it's so true. It's really, I just enjoy that so much about what we do as runners. And it's remarkable. Yeah.
what was your favorite race?
Oh, I'm asked this question a lot. I think so. Setting a PR in Chicago was great. I really can't tell you I have a favorite.
Okay.
Running in Berlin, running, through
Berlin
the
is awesome.
Brandenburg Gate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, really, I'm here, I'm doing this, London, that was great. I think Boston held a particular strong place for me because, as you know, it's such a rigorous qualifying time.
Yes.
So once I qualified for Boston, of course you have to run it.
Of course.
And then running Boston was then what made me,
you're a run. Once you run Boston, you comfortably say you're a runner.
Yeah, totally. I was just going to say something very similar. And then it's like, oh, well, now I really can, if I want to, I really can run these 6 world majors. Like it was that day. I'm like, I'm going for it, whatever it takes. I want to get that medal.
Boston was my 7th. And I said something to the tune of, now it was my 7th marathon, but I was like, now I can tell people I'm a runner. And it, I didn't feel comfortable saying it until I ran that course.
Yeah. I agree.
It's like a barrier. It's a mental barrier to entry, I should say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I totally get that. Last question as we wrap things up here. What has your running journey taught you most about yourself? Reflecting on now 52 years of life and everything that you've accomplished to date and everything that you've overcome, from some dark moments that many people out there may never come close to experiencing. What has running taught you about yourself?
It's taught me that I'm strong. It's taught me that I really can do anything I put my mind to. I come up with a plan and I execute it. And it's made me very much aware of what a survivor I am. It's just such a strong foundation for me. As you know, Bishoy, you're out on a run and the things you think about and the things you process, I'll think of projects at work. I'll think of relationships with a family member. I'll have a conversation with a family member from maybe 10 years ago and pick a different dialogue to resolve. I mean, all these types of things that happen when you run. It's just made me aware that I'm a strong individual. It's made me aware of my passions, my various passions. And I hope I can do it forever. It's just, it's taught me so much about myself. Every time I go out on a run, especially on the days where I feel, I don't really want to do this. It's raining. It's like, why would I run, or whatever, you're tired or, and those runs can often be the most rewarding because, you lace up, you put one foot in front of the other, and before you know it, you're back home. And it's just taught me that whatever the obstacle is, you can get through it. I often think about running and apply it to my life, whether it's work, relationships, any project. I tend to break things down into like a 16-week training plan. I break it down into steps, and then I just complete each step. And before you know it, there's another success, to throw in the bag. And so it continues to teach me a great deal about myself. It's really allowed me to love myself.
Yeah.
And it's from the feeling I get inside when I'm running and what I do for myself. And also, as we've hit upon so many times, that community, to share that with other individuals, that translates to me such an awareness of self-love, and to really get to the point in one's life where you say and you believe and it's honest, I love myself. That's just phenomenal. And I owe a lot to that from the gifts that running has brought me.
Yeah. And, in a way, it's interesting how things come full circle because in my opinion, as a fellow runner and in my story is you went from an unhealthy addiction to a healthy addiction. And it's okay to be addicted to that feeling of self-love. I mean, there's a lot of humility that comes behind this kind of self-love. It's not because it's a self-love that's cultivated on, failing over and over again. It's a self-love cultivated on making mistakes and not running your best race or, having a bad training day. And so, there's not an arrogance behind it. It's a humble form of self-love.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so that's one of the things about it that makes it really special. My last question to you, and, I feel like we really could have closed out there on a wonderful note, but when you look back on your story and in your journey in your life, is there a phrase or a word or a notion that maybe you'd put on the cover of your own book or something that, you want your experience to really stand out to whether it be listeners of this show. And I'm sure this is not going to be the first time you're going to be on a platform and not the last time. And I look forward to seeing you whenever you book your actual performance next year.
Oh, so I hope you'll be there. You'll be there.
So, I guess round it out for us. Give us either a word, a phrase, a thought, something that rings true to you. I mean, in my case, break barriers was always kind of the mantra. Is there anything that rings true with you?
Yes. Continue to thrive. I really look at my life as, I don't want to go through life and then, exist. I always focus on thriving. And so I'll tell myself, you got this. Continue to thrive. Who knows what will come in the future? There will be many wonderful things that will come in the future. It's, that keep going, never give up. You got this. Continue to thrive. It's so important. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for coming on, for making the time. your vulnerability is going to resonate with so many listeners out there. I know it's resonated with me, and I'm particularly grateful for the fact that you didn't hold back. I mean, you let us into some of the darker chapters of your life, and that trust you have in me and in this platform means a lot. So I just want to say thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, I do hope folks who need to hear this will hear this. And also, I want to thank you. This has done such a great deal for me. I've never really talked about this in such detail. So thank you for this platform and that gift. I feel free. And so you're doing such great work. Please continue. I know you will. But just hearing folks' stories is so important and so powerful. So I owe the gratitude to you, my friend. Keep it up.
Thank you.